Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Tatakae, Big Fighter. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Nichibutsu, Tatakae Big Fighter released to arcades in 1989. Fast forward to April of 2025, and it's now available as an arcade archive title for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we're looking at today. This is the kind of title I love to see as an arcade archive. It's an obscure shoot 'em up that you might not have otherwise known about had it not been for this release. So I appreciate the arcade archives bringing it to such a wider audience. With all that said though, this isn't the easiest shoot 'em up to recommend, as I feel it doesn't bring a whole lot new to the genre aside from its transformation mechanic, and I feel it has some balance issues and some really bad checkpoint design. All that said though, if you are looking to try an obscure shoot 'em up, then this one might be worth checking out. Placing credits into the machine brings us to this screen here. As you can see, the game does support 2 players, however it's 2-player alternating, so we'll be showing the title off as a single player experience. Starting the game, we have a quick little launch sequence and then off we go. So this is a standard horizontal scroller, although there are a few stages that will change it up and change either direction you're scrolling, potentially scrolling instead of left to right, right to left, and a little bit of vertical movement as well. As far as our fighter's abilities, so we have this primary laser, and when you start the game you have a bomb by default. There are several power-ups that will change our shot, like this one here, which gives us a pierce shot, but we also have one other really awesome ability as the Big Fighter. So it has the ability to change into this robot form. The robot form is more powerful in some ways, but it doesn't give us as many or as powerful as shots in my personal opinion. So transforming to robot mode, you have a brief little circle that surrounds your ship or robot that will provide damage to enemies. So it's not very useful. You probably don't want to use that as your primary form of attack, but it is useful. In addition to that, you can take 3 shots as the robot, and you also have the ability to fire in 8 directions around you. So depending on which mode you want to use is really dependent on where you are in the game. As I said, the fighter form, in my opinion, is the more powerful. However, using the fighter gives you a lot more versatility for where we can attack the enemies. But with that base 3-way shot, sometimes you'll miss your shots tracking the enemies around us. So it is very advantageous that we do have that extra defense than shots that we can take from the enemies. So that's one of the things you would want to use the robot for. So switching between the 2 forms of your fighter is where a lot of the strategy for this game comes into play. Another thing is I really do like the design of the robot, both our robots as well as the mech enemies that we fight. So we're nearly at the end of stage 1, and then we'll see the intro for the boss itself. So this boss is another one that I really enjoy. We have this like a nice little intro here, and then you've got some really neat boss design shown off with this particular boss. The boss itself is also multi-segmented, so as we destroy various parts of the boss, then we'll open up the ability to actually target the main core. We do have to be careful, as if we take a hit, then we're sent back to a checkpoint. The game uses checkpoints, so that's another thing that you might want to be careful of, where you're using the fighter versus where you're using the robot, as the robot does give us the ability to survive a couple extra hits before we are set back to the checkpoint. And then if you lose all your lives, it's a game over, but you're just set back to, and if you choose to continue, you're set back to the continue point that you were last at. And with all of that, we find ourselves with all of Tatakae Big Fighter served up for your enjoyment. So it's a very straightforward shoot 'em up as far as the kind of gameplay that you expect, with the addition of being able to transform into this robot form and the 8 directions that we can fire around us in this form. So as far as the minus flavors are concerned, so the biggest issue that I go and take with the game itself is just the kind of balanced design that it has. One of the key elements of that is the poor checkpoint design. So in some stages you'll have a checkpoint really close to the beginning of the game, and you'll have to go, or the stage rather, and you'll have to move through the rest of the stage before you can get to the boss itself. In addition to that, some of the stages are really short, whereas others are a little bit on the long side. And where we kind of scroll through the stages in a relatively slow manner, it does make for kind of a duller gameplay experience overall. And that's where I take some issue with the game itself. So here we find ourselves fighting the first stage boss again, as it's reaching out for us. And as the weak point gets exposed, we try and deal some heavy damage for it and avoid the shots. Once it's destroyed, go even take a second to do victory laps and transform there. And then we do have this brief little cutscene between each stages where we have an operator give us some encouraging words and then tells us what our next target is. On the plus flavors, I do like the transformation ability. The ability to change between two different forms in this kind of a shoot 'em up is a lot of fun. And then we have that sprite design that I do enjoy. The mechs, the bosses, all of it's really well designed, and I like the mech elements that are present as far as the design philosophy is concerned. However, at the end of the day, with some of the issues with this title just being a little bit more cumbersome with those balance and checkpoint issues that I've mentioned, it's not one that I can necessarily recommend for everybody unless you're looking for a more obscure arcade shoot 'em up to be able to experience. And once again, as I mentioned, that's one of the things I really do like about the Arcade Archive, just bringing this kind of a title to a much wider audience. But once again, it's just one that I would recommend for those that are more of a hardcore arcade collector. And with all that said, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for joining us this week. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.